This is the Two-Tone Uncensored Podcast. Hosts Matt Necrone, Brian Moreland, and Glenn Lotzenheiser talk everything Tennessee Titans. This show is made for the fans that bleed two-tone blue.
Hey, this is Kevin Dyson, former Tennessee Titan, and you're listening to Two-Tone Uncensored.
Welcome to Two-Tone Uncensored. I am one of your hosts, Ryan Moreland. With me, as always, tonight, Matt Necrone. And guys, get ready for the homer that is Matt Necrone tonight. How you doing, Matt?
It's a good night to be here. We're talking Clemson. Got a special guest coming on. I'm actually going to lay back, let him lay the wood, and I'm going to throw my 2 cents in here and there, but you guys are about to get taught some Clemson football.
Okay, Matt. There's a lifestyles website you should probably go be on instead of a podcast, but okay.
All right, and you're also hearing the man of a million nicknames, Glenn Lotzenheiser. How you doing tonight, Glenn?
This is a judgment-free zone here.
Man of 1,000 nicknames. Tonight it's douchebag.
That's fair.
A million nicknames. You're cutting the legs off that. All right, before we jump into the mailbag, as Matt alluded to, we have the last college profile that we're going to do this year, and that is of the defending champion, Clemson Tigers. We have a special guest coming on with us later in the show, and you'll be able to hear all that. And also, before we jump into the mailbag, I know that most of our fans obviously come from the Tennessee area, Nashville, so shout out to the Predators and the Grizzlies, both in the playoffs right now. Predators have a 3-0 lead over the number 1 seed Chicago Blackhawks and looking to complete the sweep on Thursday night. Grizzlies not faring as well, down 2 games to none to the Spurs, looking to bounce back also on Thursday night. So shout out to some Tennessee teams doing some big things. So let's jump into the mailbag, guys. First one up here is Joe Markin. He says, with Tony Romo retiring, and obviously he was the Texans' go-to guy there for a while, do you think the Texans will try to draft a first-round quarterback? Or do you think they'll probably stick with Tom Savage? Or do you think they could probably make a play for someone that's still out there in free agency?
Their only hope, I think, is to go free agent. Tom Savage is probably not going to be able to carry them through the season. There's a chance they draft somebody just to give him some competition, but I don't think there's a quarterback in this draft that you could start this year. So probably they keep searching the market for somebody they can trade for, but I don't know if it's going to happen, and that's all right by me.
No, if you ask me, I say they take a QB in the first round this year. I pray to God it's not Deshaun Watson. I've heard they like Patrick Mahomes, which is fine by me. Obviously, he's not somebody you can plug in right away and start, but I do think that Tom Savage will probably get maybe half the year under his belt. He won't be able to do it, and then they'll bring in whoever they draft. But there's really no one in free agency at the moment. I know they're not really interested in Kaepernick, and he's probably the best available. So I'm going to go ahead and say they draft one early.
It's tough, man, because this quarterback draft class is not that great. There's a couple guys that I think will be, middle of the road. Average is kind of what their ceiling looks like in the NFL. And then you have some names, Kaepernick, like you just mentioned, Matt. Jay Cutler's still out there. Those are possibilities, but it's, is that much of an improvement over, Tom Savage or someone that you draft? Is getting a guy later in his career that hasn't shown promise in Jay Cutler, or at least consistent promise, and, Kaepernick, who seems completely a boom or bust player with a lot more bust than boom. You could go draft a guy. They're a little bit later in the draft, but like I said, this is a weaker draft class, so they should still be able to get a top 3-4 guy at QB. I don't see a lot of QBs going in this first round. I would lean towards what Matt said, and that's going for one in the draft rather than trying to reinvent one of these quarterbacks that are still free agents.
Yeah, I actually read the other day Cutler's contemplating retirement right now anyway, so I think he would rather retire than go to the Texans, but, we'll see about that. I don't think he's got much left in the tank anyway. He's got way too high interception ratio, but, I think he's probably about done.
I think he's
know?
contemplating retirement because he realizes that nobody's interested. He's not getting the calls, kind of getting forced out the door.
Yeah, unless he's going to play for nothing, he's going to have a hard time finding a job this year. Because why would you take him to rebuild your team around? I mean, unless someone drafts a young quarterback that they don't want to start this year, there's no reason to pick him up. If you draft a young quarterback, then you can bring him in, start him out, in the season, and hopefully get that rookie in there halfway through the year.
Absolutely. All right, guys, let's move on to the next one in the mailbag. Good friend of the show, Morocco Taylor, asks, is there anybody in this draft that is your can't miss, can't pass on player for number 5 and number 18, assuming that we don't trade back? Is there a player for each pick that you just have to take him there?
No, I don't think there is. There's probably 10 to 12 elite level players in here, and most of those guys, are going to be available at 5, obviously, and any of them will improve this team. I mean, you could go inside linebacker, you could go corner, you could go safety, you could go wide receiver, and so there's that 5 spot. There's enough talent there that I don't think you're stuck to any one guy. But like we discussed last week, we probably trade back from there. And I want to stay in the top 10 because, like I said, it's probably about 10 elite-level players. I think if we go to 12, we're missing out. But if someone trades up to get a quarterback, someone else will drop down to us at that point. At 18, you got another group. Once you get to about 20, I think 20 to 40, they're all about the same level of guy. There's not a lot of difference in the quality of those guys. But I think more likely we trade back from the top spot for sure. 18, I'm not sure that we trade back from that one. I think we hang on to it, and we just use that top spot to trade back and get a second-round pick, too.
Yeah, to answer the question, I say no, but I think that depending on how far we do trade back, that could all depend on what kind of value we get. I mean, if we do go outside the top 10 and just say 12, we might get that 33rd pick. So, I mean, the further you go back, the more value you're actually going to get. Now, when you get to 18, it's a little bit trickier. I think that there's probably going to be guys that are of equal value, like Glenn said, from 18 to 25. So I think if we can still get something worth it to us, at that point, then I'm okay with trading back on both picks, to be honest with you.
Yeah, first to address the question, I think there are guys at both places that are absolutely can't miss, but neither of them are going to be realistic pickups. Myles Garrett's absolutely can't miss at 5. We heard last week Greg Arias came on the show, and he talked about it. The Titans have already said absolutely if he's there, we are taking him at 5. We're not trading back. But he's not going to be there. He's not going to be at pick 2, let alone pick 5. And then there's a handful of guys at 18, but they're all not going to be there again. Guys like the safeties, Adams and Hooker. There's some guys like that are going to go in the top 10, and if somehow, they slid back, if they get the old gas mask bong on or something like that, and they slip back, then yeah, absolutely, you take them at 18. But I don't think that any of those guys are going to fall that far. As for trading, I think that it's very possible. Again, what Greg Arias said last week, very possible we trade both picks. But I think right now, from all that I've heard, I think that the 18 is more likely to stay in our possession than the 5 is. All right, guys, next question here from Will Rush. So far, right now, we have 8 picks coming up in the draft. How many picks do you think we end up taking by the time it's all said and done?
9 or 10, probably, unless they combine some picks to move up somewhere into the second round.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really give a number, but 9 or 10 is probably fair. It all depends really on if it's the 5th pick. I do think even if it is back to 9 or 10 or even anywhere from 12 to 13, we're going to get our value moving back that far. So that's pretty much in my eyes more realistic than maybe trading back at 7 or 8, something like that. So I don't know that we'll necessarily have to trade back to get into the second round, because I think with the 5th pick, unless there's somebody there that they have to take, which I hope it's not Lattimore, because he probably will be there. I wouldn't be upset that we take Lattimore, but I do think there's so much more value trading back and getting more guys, because this class is so deep that I truly believe we can basically cash in on every pick that we have. So the more the merrier, but I'll go ahead and say 9 or 10.
I'm going a little lower than you guys. I'm going to say 7 to 9 because I do think we'll trade back in the first round, but also, we've seen the one draft that we've seen from Robinson. He traded back, but he also traded up in that draft, and I think you'll see him do something similar to that. So I think we're going to come in almost exactly where we're at right now with those 8 picks because I do expect us to trade back, but it wouldn't surprise me if later on in the draft we trade back up in order to get somebody. So I think it'll probably work out about the same that we have right now.
Let me ask you guys this. Would it be worth it to you, let's just say hypothetically, we keep 5, we keep 18, but we trade our 2/3 to get back up into the late second? Is that something you'd be interested in?
I mean, that's kind of tough. I guess it would really depend who's there. And, it'd be my preference then. It wouldn't be a value thing because value tells you that third-round picks become stars and become good starters just as often as second-round picks do, almost exactly the same odds. So value-wise, no, but there are some guys that I think are going to go in the second round that I think are going to be, young stars in the making, as we were talking about. It is a deep draft. I would say yes if there's some guys that I like that I think have future star potential that are not going to make it to the third round, but value-wise tells you no.
Yeah, I would rather have those second-round picks. That's why I think they do trade the first. Once you start getting into the third round, we've already got 2 picks. I could see us trading that third to move up into the second. I don't know how much he's going to give away because it seems like the whole year the talk was that we want to get back into the second round. So the fact that we gave up that pick this year makes that third-round pick more likely to get moved if we can't trade that first-round pick back.
All right, let's move on to the next one here. This one from Tyler Musson. And he's asking, are there any players between the 6th pick and the 18th pick that you think are going to go somewhere in that area that you could possibly see a value for trading up from 18 more towards our first pick in order to get? And if so, who is that player?
I don't see that player. I don't know that. I mean, it's hard to say until it actually, goes down, but going by, where we think guys are going to go, I wouldn't say that there's anybody that you'd probably have to give up way too much to jump up. So, I mean, if it's me, I'm saying no.
Yeah, I agree with Matt 100%.
I'm going to third this one. Yeah, you only really trade up that high in the first round if you need a quarterback or if there's somebody that you think absolutely can't miss player at a valued position, like a defensive end, for instance. And we don't need a quarterback, and I don't think there's anybody that's going to be in that group that is absolutely can't miss. So, no, I agree that I don't think there's anybody to trade up for but in those spots. Last question here, this one from Sunny Ali to wrap up our mailbag. If you could interview any Titan that's currently on the roster for the show, who would it be and why?
Well, I've said before Delaney Walker. We've answered that one a couple times. Delaney Walker, I think, would give you the most real interview as far as he's going to tell you exactly what's on his mind. I think DeMarco Murray would also give you that quality of a interview. Mariota would be the easiest answer just because everybody wants to talk to the quarterback. But I don't know that he would be as candid with you and tell you as much fun stuff as those other 2 guys would.
Mariota was the first instant answer I thought of, but he'd honestly be really dull, and I wouldn't want to I'd bring him on, obviously, but my first choice would be Taylor Lewan, obviously for all the reasons that we already know about him. I've heard many interviews with him, and he's obviously a character to say the least. He's by far the guy I'd bring on.
Hi, you guys read my mind there together. I was going to say, if you for real information, for good stuff, good talkable topics that you're going to get the most out of the player, you go with Walker. And if you just want a fun, exciting, possibly weird interview, Ben Jones or Taylor Lewan. It'd be a blast to interview Taylor Lewan because of his personality, and Ben Jones for the same reason, just because they're out there, they're charismatic, they're funny guys. Delaney Walker, he says what's in his mind. He doesn't hold anything back. He doesn't pull any punches. So obviously that would be a fun interview as well. Would probably, if I had to narrow down to one, it'd probably be Lewan because just how fun the interview would be.
Yeah, listen, I love Marcus, but I've heard interviews with him before, and they'll put you to sleep. He's not anybody you're going to get excited over. I mean, obviously talent-wise, he's great. I love having him as the quarterback. I wouldn't have it any other way right now, but we're talking interviews. We're not talking talent.
Yeah, I mean, he's the great thing about him as a player is that he's so calm and so even, keeled. But that's a terrible interview. Just you want a guy who's going to give you a good sound bite, who's going to have some energy, who's not afraid to piss some people off. And all those other guys, they got no problem saying whatever's on their mind. They're not worried about hurting somebody's feeling. Marcus is a leader. He's got to be everybody's leader. So he can't go out there and start ripping people. He can't go out there and tell you bad things about people. He can't call somebody out. So he won't be that fun of an interview, just because he's too professional and then he's also too even-headed to give us that kind of fun.
Another guy you could probably throw on that list, too, Jarrell Casey, is another guy that says what is on his mind. He's a quieter guy, but, he never pulls any punches. He says what he believes, too.
Arakpo would be awesome, too.
Oh, absolutely. Just for the energy level that Arakpo has in his interviews. But that's all we have for the mailbag. Thanks for everybody that sent them in. Last week, obviously, we didn't have a mailbag, so we're, getting caught up on everything. Be sure to send those in on our Facebook page for Two Tone Podcast. Or you can just join the Tennessee Titans Uncensored Facebook fan page. If you aren't already, this is not just the only reason to join. It's a great page, the best Titans fan page. And that's official. You can put the rubber stamp on that. That is a fact. It's just science. So definitely join that. And look out for the mailbag posts where you can comment, get your questions answered live on the show. So let's move on to the news here, guys. This finally, we're drudging through the offseason. We never have any good news, and finally this week we have some newsworthy stuff to talk about. So first thing I wanted to bring up here, obviously big news coming out this week. The team and Jason McCourty tried to renegotiate his contract. It just wasn't happening. They could not reach a similar number, so Jason McCourty was cut after being with the team for, I believe, 8 years. What is your guys' reaction to this?
I'm sad to see him go. I think it was the right move. We've all talked about how the last couple of years he can't really stay healthy. He looks like he's lost a step. He wore down throughout the season. We know he wasn't the future of that position. I would have liked to have him for at least another year while we bring a rookie in and groom him, because I don't think we did enough with Logan Ryan to solve our problems in secondary. So injecting a rookie in there, even with LaShawn Sims, it's going to be a rough year for our secondary again. We have high hopes. We'll see what happens in the draft and what happens after the draft, for that matter. But I hate to see him go. I wish him the best. One of the things I heard was that he refused to move to safety, which is a move that we've talked about on this show plenty of times, that we think he'd be a really good safety, but he doesn't feel like he's done at corner yet. I'm curious to see if he doesn't wind up on the Patriots and go play with his brother for a couple years.
Yeah, that's got to be a done deal already. I think he's going to New England for sure. I would have liked to keep him another year, just like you said. It makes sense for everybody that he didn't stick around. I think he deserves to make his money wherever he plays. He's been a great player for us on some really bad teams. He's a great locker room guy. A lot of people have mixed opinions about him as far as his play right now or lately, the last year or two. Injury has definitely been an issue, but he's a solid guy, and besides maybe Logan Ryan right now, he would have been the best corner on the team. It sucks that he couldn't stick around another year, but I'm definitely not mad at him. It's kind of like the Michael Griffin situation, only I feel like I was a little bit closer with McCourty than I was Griffin to see those guys go. Griffin obviously didn't work out in Minnesota. I'm hoping McCourty can at least get another couple years, hopefully in New England, man. I'm not hating on that. I'd actually like to see that happen. He's been a soldier, and, for as bad as we've been, all the years he's been on the team, he was a late 6th round, 7th round pick. He's definitely paid his dues here, and I'm rooting for him wherever he goes.
Yeah, you guys both put that really well. Sad to see him go because it's a guy that, when we were at our worst, he was still playing hard each and every game, and a guy that was really easy to like, and a really, really fantastic football player that played his heart out for this team. I would have liked to keep him on because of his talent level, like you guys said, but just not at that $7 million. That I thought we did what was right here, for the team. The one thing I don't like about this is it does put more pressure on us in the draft that we need to get a cornerback early. I think if we keep him, it takes a little bit of that pressure off. And we can focus on some other areas. But with him not there, it's going to put a little bit more pressure. But I like I said, we made the right move here and cutting him because he wasn't going to get to the price point that we needed him to get at in order to stay on this team. And move on to the next piece of news here. Some guys that did agree to pay cuts, Denoris Searcy and Harry Douglas, take pay cuts to stay with the team. Douglas went from $3.75 million a year to $1.75 with incentives. Searcy takes a $2.25 million pay cut, going from $5.62 million to $3.4 million. What do you guys think about these guys taking pay cuts?
Well, that was the only way Douglas was staying on the roster. Basically, veteran minimum kind of money is what he's talking about now. He's not going to get those incentives. There's almost zero chance that he's involved enough to hit any kind of a reasonable incentive deal. Searcy, I talked about that already, and we've mentioned before that he's expensive for what we're going to get out of him, given that he's probably not our starter anymore. Well, which we signed Cyprian. I think the writing was on the wall that if he wanted to be on this team, he was going to take less money or we were going to cut him. When you cut McCourty, you look at these two guys, it's pretty easy to imagine us cutting them too. So I'm not surprised with either deal. I think both of them add some quality depth, and at that price point, I don't mind it. So I'm glad they kept them both around just for the money that we signed them at.
Yeah, I think both players, if they didn't take their cuts, would have been on the street. I said that last week and a couple weeks ago with Denoris Searcy. I think now that he took the cut, he's great depth. I think that's going to help us out a lot. As far as Harry Douglas goes, this still doesn't necessarily guarantee his roster spot. So, I'm not really up or down on that move. It's good that he's willing to renegotiate. He's a team player. I honestly don't think that he would go anywhere else and put himself in a better situation than where he is here, being that we're so thin at receiver at the moment. But, he could surprise us. He's not going to light anybody up at 32 years old, but he could be, reliable Harry Douglas. He made some plays last year. As far as, Denoris Searcy seeing any starting playing time, I don't see that happening. But I do think that, the fact that he was willing to take that cut shows that he's willing to be a part of this team, and that's important. And we need guys like that to step up and take the sacrifice.
Yeah, it tells you that this is a team on the rise, because if we were coming off of a 2-win season and we looked like garbage, you don't take a pay cut to stay on that bad of a team. You're like, cut me, please.
Absolutely. Me and Matt were talking before the show started about Harry Douglas, and both of us agreed that this is a guy that still doesn't have a great shot of making the final roster. I like Harry Douglas, and like Matt said, he came out and he made plays when we needed him to in certain spots last year. Made some big plays when we needed him to. And he's a guy that's really easy to like. He's got a great work ethic, pretty quiet guy, does what he's supposed to do. But still, this makes him obviously more keepable, but, when push comes to shove, he's probably the first guy out of the door if we need someone to free up some space at the wide receiver core. Searcy, we move around our safeties a lot. We like to get a lot of different guys involved, so he'll still see, I believe, in my opinion, he'll still see a decent chunk of playing time this year. I don't think he'll start at all, but we like to move around a lot at the safety spot, and I think you're going to see him get some playing time, here and there. But I'm glad to see both of these guys, do what's right for the team and really know their own value. It's really hard for anybody, and it's not, just being in the NFL, but it's really hard to be honest about what your value is in any situation, and it's hard to go down instead of going the opposite direction. So, hats off to them for realizing what their value is and being, like Glenn said, team players and taking these pay cuts.
I completely forgot the situation with Harry Douglas and Chris Harris from Denver. You talked about how he's such a nice guy and everybody likes him, but when he made that dirty play, so to speak, there was a lot of controversy surrounding him at that point. But my theory was, it doesn't matter. He won't be on the team next year, but now, look at him now, ready to claim a spot on the roster. So we'll see how it goes. But I don't think he's a dirty player. I just think that play was, probably unnecessary. But nonetheless, he did it, and we'll probably hear about it this year as well.
He got into their head, and we won that game, so I see it as a plus. Dirty or not, I liked it.
And it led to one of the greatest pictures of all time of Avery Williamson tossing.
Taking the trash out.
Yeah, taking the trash out.
That's such an iconic picture at this point. I mean, that picture's probably going to be on his Hall of Fame poster. Just get the fuck out of here.
All right, next piece of news, some good news here. Marcus Mariota was interviewed this week and said he should be able to run at full speed in just 2 to 3 weeks here. Coaches are still saying that they'll likely see more of Matt Castle during the training camp and mini camps just to be on the safe side. But this is good news to see that Mariota's coming back so quickly.
Be better to see a shitload of Castle. I don't want Mariota doing anything until it's time. They're rushing that guy around.
Yeah, I agree. There's nothing to add. I mean, it's great news, obviously. Just keep him healthy and don't rush him back.
All right, guys, last piece of news we have here before we head into the break. Derrick Henry misses a voluntary workout. Derrick Henry missed it because he is taking spring classes at the University of Alabama trying to finish off his degree. There has been definitely a mixed reaction about this. I wanted to read to you guys what Jarrell Casey had to say on Derrick Henry missing this voluntary workout. We were just talking about how Casey's one of those guys that says what is on his mind. This is his direct quote. "It definitely puts that little check mark in the back of my mind and lets me know who I can count on and who I can't count on. To see your teammates show up is definitely great." So that's what Casey had to say on, the second-year running back missing the first voluntary workout of the year. What do you guys think about this?
My first reaction is shut the fuck up. It's practice. It's preseason. It's not even preseason, actually. And it's voluntary. Just the biggest deal has been made out of this for nothing. So shut up, people. Shut up. But also, I don't know that the teammates understood that he was at school, bettering himself, getting his degree, which I'm sure he promised himself or somebody else that he was going to do. If you're going to miss practice, that's the best possible reason you could be missing practice for. And it is just practice. I get it. But he's the backup running back. He's got a bright future ahead of him. This doesn't mean a damn thing.
Yeah, I'm glad that it was something like, he's going to class. I don't know why they didn't I guess it's really nobody's business because it is voluntary practice, but making it clear before, the news hit that he didn't show, like it seemed like he wasn't a team player. It was all blown out of proportion. The best thing that happened with this is that Paul Kaharski ended up getting blocked on Twitter from Derrick Henry and basically made a post about it that I saw today on Facebook. So that puts Derrick Henry up like at least 10 points in my book. So,
yeah, well, I mean, like you guys said, it's not a big deal. When you start missing mandatory workouts, mandatory practices, that's when you start to worry about a guy. But as a voluntary workout, however, I do like what Casey had to say. Kind of, he tactfully told him, let him know, because that Derrick Henry's going to see this. And he knows that, Jarrell Casey does. He tactfully let him know, this team, you need to be here. This team's headed for great things, and we need 100% out of you, and we're not getting 100% right now. Now, I don't find any issues with Derrick Henry missing this voluntary practice so he can get his degree and, like Glenn said, better himself. But I do like, veterans when they come out and kind of tell the young guys that, it's 100% is what we expect. And 100% is what we're going to get out of you. I like the way that Jarrell Casey handled that. And he wasn't, an ass about it. He wasn't calling him out. He wasn't making him look bad. But he just put it tactfully, like, hey, young guy, you need to be here. I like the way that Jarrell Casey handled it. But I don't have a problem with Derrick Henry missing this in order to finish off his degree. All right, that's all we have for the news this week. We're going to go into a quick commercial break. When we come back, as promised, a special guest coming on the show with us, and we are going to talk about this Clemson Tigers team and the great draft class that they have coming out. A lot of potential Titans, as we've talked about before on the show, and we'll definitely get into that when we come back after this break.
Time to pay the bills. Some quick ads and we'll get right back to the show.
Hey Titans fans, you've probably heard us talk about the group page several times on this show, and I'm sure you're wondering what we're talking about.
Tennessee Titans Uncensored is a Facebook group page that was built by Titans fans for Titans fans and was founded by our very own Matt Necrone.
If you're a Titans fan that's looking to talk about the latest Titan news, then this is where you need to be.
And you can help me shit talk the crackheads.
Because nobody likes crackheads.
That is Tennessee Titans Uncensored on Facebook. Tighten up. Hey guys, you've heard us talk about Hang 10 Apparel before on the show, and if you haven't checked them out, then you're truly missing out.
Hang 10 is the one place to find unique Titans gear that you will not find anywhere else.
Whether it's a Maragota hoodie, a Mahalo Etcha Boy t-shirt, or Mike Keith's Music City Miracle Call on a sweater.
There are no flags on the field! It's a miracle!
The only place to find it is Hang 10.
Just go to hangtn.com to find all this great gear.
And while you're there, don't forget to use our promo code TWOTONE to get 10% off any purchase.
That's hangtn.com, the official Titan shop of Two Tone Uncensored.
Tighten up.
You're listening to Two Tone Uncensored, brought to you by Podbean.
Hey, this is Bo Scaife. You listening to Two Tone Uncensored. Tighten up.
All right, we're back from that commercial break. As promised, we're going to get into some Clemson football here and talk about some of these players coming up in the draft. Great draft class that Clemson has, as I mentioned earlier. With us, we have Clemson superfan Alex Poda. Alex, excited to have you on the show with us tonight.
Yeah, pleasure to be on. Ready to talk some about our great draft class and our great guys coming through. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yes, obviously, Alex, a big name coming out. We'll start with the quarterback here. Even though Titans aren't in the market for a quarterback, we figured we'd start with him just because one of the biggest names coming out this year, Deshaun Watson, coming off a stellar season, obviously winning the national championship, was a Heisman finalist 2 straight years, an outstanding player. The guy has a lot of tools to work with coming out, but one of the highest praises that he has gotten is his leadership and, how vocal he is and how he has been an example for this team to follow. Obviously something that NFL teams look for as a leader. Would you say, out of this quarterback class, that Deshaun Watson is the guy that you want to get if you're looking for a true leader at the quarterback position?
I think the Browns are absolutely outrageous and blasphemous to the game of football if they consider Mitch Trubisky over him. There's, like you said, there's so many tools from Watson that we'll get into that really kind of give him that leg up. Actually very comparable to the Titans quarterback, Marcus Mariota. So, he's got the mobility, he's got the leadership, he's got the fourth quarter poise, he's got the big game poise, and he's the guy that's going to lead you in a locker room as well and kind of better his teammates. As you all probably know, Clemson was not the more talented team in the national championship game, but they still beat a much more talented team, and I think Watson was a big reason for that.
One of the best college quarterbacks we've seen in a while. He obviously has a lot going on, but he does have some things that people are calling into question. So I wanted to bring 2 of the bigger ones up that people have been talking about. Obviously, deep ball accuracy has been something that he struggled with at times, sailing balls over top of the head of his intended receiver. And then the other thing is his frame. He's not a great big guy. He's a little slender for his size. Do you think those 2 things will affect him, and if so, how much throughout his NFL career?
Well, 2 things I laugh about for both of those things. One is everyone says he doesn't have a strong arm as well, but they complain that he overthrows the deep ball, so I find that pretty comical. Also, his sophomore season, he was number 1 in the FBS for quarterback rating for balls thrown 20 yards in the air, and that was without Mike Williams, who fractured his neck in the first game of that season. So that was throwing to guys like Artavis Scott, who we'll talk about, who's undersized and things like that. So actually, I don't think his deep ball accuracy is an issue. You can see his throws to Deion Kane in the Louisville game, Hunter Renfrow against Bama last year. A lot of throws like that. And then as far as the slenderness is, I don't get how they call Mitch Trubisky prototypical size when Watson measured in 2/8 of an inch shorter than him and 1 pound off. So I don't really think that the frame will be an issue. I think he actually is bigger than most people think. And I don't think people realize how much weight he put on between his sophomore and junior years because he had the knee issues, because he got a little banged up running. And he put on roughly 15 pounds before his true junior campaign to really kind of be suited for that bruising, for those hits, and really for Alabama and teams like that who, in my opinion, basically is a professional defense. So taking that kind of beating from those top players, from Florida State defenses, from Alabama defenses, and being able to pop back up and remain poised the way he was despite being targeted by players like Reuben Foster, I think he withstands well in the NFL. I think that his deep ball is a little bit better than he's given credit for. Yeah, he got a little amped up sometimes here and there, but, we see the same things from all quarterbacks. Tom Brady floats some deep balls, and he's arguably the greatest ever to play the game. So I think it's a little nitpicky just because it is draft season and everyone's trying to look for negatives in people's games. But to answer the question, I do think that he'll be able to overcome any shortcomings with stature and arm strength and accuracy to become a successful pro quarterback.
Yeah, I think honestly, man, like his interceptions were up a little bit this year, but a lot of those throws were off timing routes. It's not something that it's not all on him, basically. But the biggest thing about Deshaun Watson is after he throws a touchdown, after he throws an interception, he's always poised. He's ready for big game situations. And really, in the college game, he was pretty much the best kind of leader you could have on the field. I mean, his game speaks for itself. He definitely is not perfect by any means, but I do think that in the right scheme, I think that somebody could definitely groom him up to be a very good NFL quarterback.
Yeah, I completely agree. And to touch on those interceptions, is you can also look at a lot of his interceptions this year were off actually NFL throws where you're asked to kind of lead the receiver and throw the receiver open. For example, his first interception against Ohio State where Mike Williams actually slipped and fell. He had one of those against Troy. He had some mistimed routes, some miscommunications with receivers, and a lot of them, and some of them were just hell of catches. Like that first pick he threw against Auburn was one of the best catches I'd saw all year, and it was from a defensive back at Auburn. So I do think the interceptions were a little bit inflated from what they actually could have been. It's still one less than Jameis Winston had the year before he got drafted number 1 overall. So I think that's one thing a lot of people aren't talking about is, they're saying it's such a big deal for him, but other guys like Winston and Roethlisberger and other big arm guys kind of didn't get that beef coming out.
Good stat. I like that.
You've already said you think he should be number 1, just given Cleveland's need. What's the farthest you can see him dropping?
I don't see him dropping out of the first round because I do think some of those teams, like if he does slip, maybe Cleveland with the 33rd pick or the Jets being, 39, I believe. I think they'll kind of, if he's still around toward that end of the first round type thing, if someone like the Texans, who obviously have quarterback issues of their own, don't take him, I do see somebody trading into that back of the first round and getting him. So I don't think he slips past the end of the first round into the second. And if he does, I don't think he gets past the first 10 in the second round. I think that's about the floor for him.
I'd be shocked if he goes to the second round.
I agree. I actually just read recently that the Jets are looking at him at number 6. So, I mean, I pray he doesn't go to Houston, obviously, but there's definitely going to be – I could see him going probably – if Cleveland stays at 12, I could see him going there for sure.
Yeah, I've also seen that Arizona is considering him with 13 to kind of play behind Palmer for a year or two and groom him with Bruce Arians, who we know did great things with Andrew Luck and resurrected Palmer's career. So I do think that might be a good fit for him as well, to kind of sit for a year or two. However much from a bias standpoint, I'd love to see him play right away and kind of prove everybody wrong that he's good to stay. But, if he grooms for a year or two, I think that'd be good for his career too.
All right, Alex, let's move on to a guy that all three of us on the show are pretty fond of and, has been linked to the Tennessee Titans a decent amount throughout the offseason. That's wide receiver Mike Williams. coming off a spectacular season. He's really demonstrated what kind of athlete he is, and just an amazing wide receiver. My question, let's start off with the negative here. You mentioned earlier when we were talking about it, the neck injury. Obviously came back from that, had a great year last year. Do you think that NFL teams are going to, I'll say this way, how much weight do you think NFL teams are going to put on that neck injury? Because even though he did come back, neck injuries tend to be very serious. You don't ever get minor neck injuries. So how much weight do you think that neck injury holds on the player that we're looking at?
I think his freak athleticism helps a bit because, you mentioned no minor neck injuries. Peyton Manning's a perfect example of that. Being up in the Tennessee area, you understand how big a deal he was there, and his neck injuries at age 37 obviously cost him. But Mike Williams being in his low 20s, being a freakish athlete and really coming back this year, and you saw him take some big shots to the head this year. He took 2 against Alabama that both missed targeting calls, and I'm not salty about that at all. But
I was.
Yeah. he took a lot of big hits this year, and he always popped right back up. Maybe he went through some concussion protocol, went back in the game. And I do think that the fact that he didn't have any lingering issues from it this year, and that he played fully, and he played, I believe the stat was over 75% of Clemson's offensive snaps, with the kind of depth they had too. So that was pretty impressive as well. And with him running all those vertical routes. But the fact that he was game ready every single week, and withstood all those big hits, I think that's what NFL scouts might have been looking at this year, and to see if there were any lingering issues. And obviously they'll go through it in their physicals and all that stuff. But I don't see it being a large cause for concern right now because of the success that he had of staying healthy this year.
I agree. I've seen a lot out of him this year especially, but every time he plays, he is a difference maker. If you recall watching the South Carolina game, which I'm sure you did, he was carrying two defenders on his back, 8 yards up the field. Like, the guy's a freak. Has great ability to go up and get the ball, obviously. In my opinion, I haven't seen much on Corey Davis. People argue who's better. Some say John Ross is better just because of the speed, but when you put it all together, there's no one, especially for our offense, which I'm sure you're probably not familiar with, but to have someone like that on our team for the red zone threat that Mariota is, Mike Williams is a perfect fit.
I completely agree. 'Cause again, like you said, I'm not as familiar with y'all's offense, but I watched Mariota a lot in when he was at Oregon and that kind of system. I know what kind of a run threat he is for, maybe a pocket breakdown or something like that, and he's got good touch. And the fact of the matter is there was a scout I read on Bleacher Report right before the Clemson-Bama game that compared him to Megatron, saying that he's the closest physical specimen they've seen since Calvin Johnson coming out of Georgia Tech. Big, fast, can go up the ball, a little shaky route running, but the big thing they also said was he's not near his peak yet, and so he'll only continue to get better. And, at 6'3.5", running a 4.5 40, which I know we talked after that happened, and that was an outrageously good 40 time for a guy who people thought was kind of slow on the ground. So he's got all the tools to be incredible. And then you saw him just embarrass Averett and Humphrey in the national championship game for a few catches. And those are potential first, second-round guys in the NFL. So.
Yeah, one thing you may not know is we actually have 2 first-round picks. We have 5 and 18 because we got one from the Rams last year. That 40 time was obviously huge. Glenn and I were actually talking before it happened. We kind of hoped he was, a tad on the slow side just so maybe we could get him at 18, but I don't see him slipping. I don't know if I'm comfortable with him at 5. If there's any way we could trade back a few spots between 9, 10, somewhere in there, I would love to get him there.
Especially because, a lot of teams get quarterback hungry. So maybe even the Jets, one spot behind, may trade a spot to go up for a QB, and then they get you a little more breathing room with Williams or something. But definitely I do think the trade down to the 8 or 9 range would be ideal to get Williams there. He's the full package. He's an incredible receiver, and just what he can do physically is awesome. And then you can even tell he can handle the volume too. In that Pitt game, he had 15 catches for 202 yards. And not to mention that interception Watson threw, he tracked down a safety 75 yards downfield and he got a shoestring tackle. So he's got heart too. He's a very competitive guy, and I think that shows up on tape too.
Corey Davis, obviously Mike Williams' biggest competition to be the first wide receiver off of the board. A lot of people out there like Corey Davis better. I've made it my opinion known that I don't have a very high opinion of Corey Davis after seeing him play in person. But it is to be said, a lot of teams have these guys rated really closely heading into the draft. So make the case of why you go with Mike Williams over Corey Davis.
My case primarily is the competition that they played. Not to take anything away from Western Michigan in the season they had this year, but Mike Williams, in all honesty, the ACC was the top conference in college football this year. 9-3 in bowl games, 10-3 after the championship. He played against Auburn, which had a great defense, and he put up good numbers in his first game back from a neck injury there. He schooled Alexander in that Louisville game, who's a top corner prospect, great ball hawking corner. He, put up good numbers against Florida State. He destroyed the secondary of Alabama for some big catches. And it's just, he's a game-changing receiver. Corey Davis is a very good receiver. Mike Williams is a game-changing receiver. And the physical tools he has, plus his ability to make a 50-50 ball, people say 75-25. It's a 90-10 ball with him when you throw it up there. And I'm going to point to that the second play of Clemson's game when he's driving into Bama. Watson throws it up over Averett, and Williams just goes up and brings it down like it's absolutely nothing. Gets up, and he was ready to run like it was an NFL catch, like the guy didn't touch him for contact. He's already ready for that. He's got great body control. Amazing for the fade. His first touchdown of the year against Georgia Tech with a 6'3" corner on him, same height. Goes straight up over the guy, brings it down in the corner of the end zone 2 feet down. He's just a game-changing, team-changing player, and you can see how much Clemson's offense evolved with primarily the same players from that championship game loss in the 15-16 season to the championship win in the 16-17 season, and he makes that kind of difference.
Yeah, Mike Williams is definitely a game changer. Like Matt said, that 40 times what sealed it for me. I was high on him anyway. He was really the only guy I wanted as a receiver in the top 10. That when he ran that 4.5, he won't be quite that fast with pads on in an actual game, but he's more than fast enough. And at his size and range, and like you mentioned with his body control, we've got a very accurate quarterback who can put it on his back shoulder for him, and he's going to be just about unstoppable. The comparisons to Megatron, I think, are a little bit overblown, but at the same time, he's got that potential to him. He's definitely, I think, going to be the best receiver coming out of this draft class.
And then the last thing with the body control, I think seeing his ability to catch those slant passes on third and shorts where he kind of basketball boxes people out, I think that's what really separates him from Corey Davis, is his ability to go over the middle of the field too, not just the vertical and the back shoulder, but he's not afraid to be in that middle of the field taking hits and going down for low balls, shielding the ball where the defender has no play on it.
All right, moving on here. We'll go to the defensive side of the ball for a moment. Cordray Tankersley, a very talented cornerback coming into this draft that is very cornerback deep, which is lucky for us Titans fans. Obviously, we have a desperate need at the cornerback position. The first question I want to ask you about Tankersley, the first two things that come to mind when you watch this guy, when you see his tapes, when you take a good look at him, is size and production. Obviously coming off of a season where he had 8 interceptions, and he's 6'1", and ran that 4.4 40. That's something obviously like. There is some weaknesses in his game, but that size of production really opens up your eyes. How much do you think, even though he's not the most ironed out NFL-ready corner we're going to see, how much do those two factors, the size and production, push him up the draft board, come here in about a week?
Well, I think it should push him up. And like you said, it's a great, great corner draft. In any other draft class, he'd be a top 3 corner. I think that's safe to say. In any other draft class, he's probably a first-round pick. But with how many great corners there are on this one, they're looking at him second, third, fourth round. But he does have the good size, which is going to be good to match up with top receivers. He's got great speed. And like you said, good production. You saw he sealed the game with that interception against Virginia Tech that sent Clemson to the playoff. So he's also a big-time player. I think he's more game-ready than people think he is. His first year as a starter, which was his junior season, Mackenzie Alexander, who got drafted by the Vikings last year, he was a great corner. He only had the ball thrown to him on 7% of throws. So everybody was attacking Tankersley, who was a first-year starter, and that's where he started putting up his big production. And actually, he had a big interception that game against North Carolina that year in the ACC title. So he's been in those moments. He's been the weak link. He's been picked on, and that's kind of forced him to evolve as a player and become productive and become a ball hawk. And I think he's arguably the best man-to-man corner in the draft.
Well, you make a great point about him evolving. Obviously, great size, great speed. He ran a 4.40. He's in big games. He's made big plays, and obviously that's the thing that stands out for most people. One thing I'll say negatively about him is, in most cases, when he knows that he kind of gets lost when the ball's in the air, and instead of trying to track it down, he will throw body contact and get the flag thrown on him. Now he's done that quite a few times that I've noticed since he's been there. But I think he's got so much more room to grow, and I think with his size and speed and his playmaking ability, I definitely see him going at latest, I would say, mid-second round.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that contact point. You know, Clemson as a whole defense had an issue with defensive pass interference this year. That's why we lost to Pittsburgh. We got 9 defensive holding or pass interference calls, and probably 2 of them were legitimate. And again, still not salty. But he got, I think, 3 of them in that game. And, you know, he's a great player, but like you said, it's not his instinct, but his awareness sometimes dips. And I think that's hopefully his next level of evolvement. And with maybe a good defensive coach, he can kind of develop that and be a little bit better. And I don't know how Brent Venables coaches his guys. Maybe he tells them if you're going to get beat deep, just commit the flag because it's only 15 yards. In the NFL, that can cost you 40 yards. So that is a major concern for him, but it's one I do think worth taking for the physical tools that you get. You know, how much would the Panthers at this point last year have been salivating to get that kind of corner instead of, I remember who the hell they drafted, but it was some nobody instead of, you know, a proven corner because the guy they wanted got taken the pick before, and there was no depth at that position. So it's just interesting, and I think a team, like you said, maybe mid-second round, early third round, lucky to get them.
Yeah, the point about taking the penalty, that's what made Josh Norman so good, is why he never got just smoked deep a lot, is when he was with Carolina, he was free to take that penalty, so he would commit the penalty rather than get burned for a touchdown. In Washington, you know, he didn't have such a great year this year because I don't know if they don't allow him that freedom or he just couldn't get his hands on the guy in order to commit the penalty. But that's a great point, that committing the penalty in college and taking the 15 yards instead of getting just burned for a touchdown, it's a very smart thing to do.
Yeah, I'm just curious to know whether it is a coaching thing that they tell him to do that or if it is a play flaw. Maybe a combination. Who knows? But we're not in their meeting rooms, so we can't know for sure. Just all speculation for that.
All right, let's move on from Tankersley here to a defensive teammate. That's big old Carlos Watkins, coming in at 6'3", 309 pounds. A big boy there. Was a productive, successful guy with his time at Clemson. Where do you see, this one's been hard for me when I'm doing my mock drafts, is where I think Watkins is going to go, because he's not as explosive as you might like, but he has the size, he's athletic, but I don't know, the production says you should be a little bit more forward, but when you look at comparatively, might be dropping back. So where do you think we'll see Carlos Watkins get drafted?
I think we'll see him mid to late second round. He should be late first round. I think he gets overlooked a lot because of Dexter Lawrence, who in 2 years we may be talking about as the number 1 overall pick. They play side by side, and he's a huge freshman. But Carlos Watkins, on a team that led the country this year, Clemson's defense led the country in tackles for loss. He led the team in tackles for loss. He also led the team in percentage of snaps played. So he's actually very fit for a guy who's 309 pounds. He was in the game almost all the time with a very deep defensive line rotation. My lasting memory of him was I was at the Clemson Notre Dame game 2 years ago in that hurricane. And on that 2-point conversion, I was sitting looking down that goal line, and big old Carlos Watkins takes two offensive linemen and chest flies them into Deshaun Kaiser to bring him down for the game-winning tackle. And that pure strength that he has, I think, is just important. He's a little bit smaller than Vince Wilfork, but he's a lot more athletic than Vince Wilfork. But he kind of clogs that middle in the same kind of way on that run defense. And I think he's been productive at batting balls down at the line and at pass breakups and pass rushing as well. And he's got very good lane discipline. Oftentimes when quarterbacks broke contain, they broke more toward the side of either Austin Bryant, Cleveland Farrell, and Dexter Lawrence, the more inexperienced players, where he kind of has that discipline to not get beat. So I do think he's a little bit undervalued because of the other defensive linemen that Clemson's put out in those past few years with Vic Beasley, who, in my opinion, was the best defensive player in the league this year. Shaq Lawson was great, and, we're cranking out Andre Branches and, a lot of quality players. Grady Jarrett set the Super Bowl sack record this year. And so I do think he gets overshadowed because of the defensive linemen at Clemson and that have been produced recently.
I agree with Ryan as far as where he's going to go time-wise. I would guess somewhere maybe mid to late second, early third, somewhere in that range. Best way to describe him, in my opinion, is probably just very active. He's always got his hands up, like you said, crazy athletic. He kind of shows up, out of nowhere. Like you said, he plays next to Dexter Lawrence, who is a beast. That guy is a true freshman who came on day one. Carlos shadowed because of him, and I think that somebody's going to get a good D tackle out of him. I think he's more of a good situational player as opposed to a 3-down guy. But I do think that somewhere in the second to third round, I think somebody's going to get a good D tackle.
Yeah, I think he'll be looked at as one of the better values. I think a lot of these Clemson defenders will be looked back as better values. Not maybe the best players, but the best value as far as where they get selected and the production they give. So Carlos Watkins, I do think, fits that mold too.
And his NFL comparison is Sylvester Williams, who's a guy that the Titans brought in from the Denver Broncos this offseason. Like you said, he's an active player. Matt brought up that he's really good about getting his hands into the passing lanes, good backside cuts. Obviously needs a little bit of work on just techniques and developing secondary moves when his first one doesn't work. But definitely, a good player, someone you can help build a defensive line around, and will be, like you guys said, a good value if he goes, third round. Second round's probably about where he belongs. So if you get him in the third, you did really good for yourself.
Yeah, for sure. And his motor's very good too. You see him trailing plays a lot, even after it goes away from. You see him bringing up the rear and preventing cutbacks. So I do think that's another thing that if you watch Clemson the games this last year, you see big old Carlos Watkins trailing the play, even if he's not going to make a play. So.
The one thing about Watkins that worries me going to the next level is a lot of that weight is north of the belt line. He kind of can get a little top heavy. His legs not nearly as big as you would expect for a guy that's, pretty solidly over that 300-pound mark. And when you have a guy like that, normally when they get to the NFL, they have the tendency to, play too high and get pushed around by physical guards. Do you think that's going to be a problem for Watkins?
I think it could be early on. But again, he faced Ronnie Staley and Nick Martin, both of whom he took down for that game-winning play against Notre Dame. So he has played against good offensive guards. He wasn't as consistent that game, so I do think you kind of see that issue. He does play a little high. He does stand up a little much. He relies on his upper body strength too much. And guys who get good leg leverage can really take advantage of that. So I do think strength staffs will have to focus on developing his lower body a little more, technique-wise developing that leg drive a little more. And, maybe third year he starts playing a little bit lower, a little bit stronger down there, becomes even a better value, if he continues to improve and develop that part.
All right, let's move on here to Jordan Leggett. This is a guy that, and maybe not everybody I would say is very familiar. He's not a household name for sure, but is a talented football player. Someone that really came to my, into my universe first because of Matt being a homer. But I learned more about the kid, watched more of his tape, and he is a talented kid. Another thing, just like we were talking about Tankersley, very talented tight end, stuck in a very deep draft class at his position. So that being said, how far do you think we're going to see Leggett drop in this draft?
Well, that's an interesting question because tight ends are being valued very differently now. Rob Gronkowski was a third-round pick, I think. And they've been just valued more in the last couple of years, so I still don't know where the actual draft position for them is. I've seen people talking about O.J. Howard possibly going top 5, which I think is outrageous for a tight end. But if you get a guy who's like Gronkowski or Jimmy Graham when he was with the Saints, then yeah, it's worth top 5 production. So I'm not quite sure where tight ends fit in. I do think he has holes in his game that are going to make him maybe the 4th or 5th tight end taken. I do think he'll go in front of Jake Butt, who blew out his ACL. But he's another kind of guy. He's clutch. That's the only way to say it is he appears in big games. They utilize his skill set in mismatches when they need to. He had the game winner against Florida State, against Louisville. He had that huge catch to show his range of motion, which scouts say is an issue, to set up the game-winning touchdown against Bama. So he's a very, very talented player, but he's not very good at run blocking. He never had to. They used him as a big receiver on the inside, and I think that's going to hurt his stock quite a bit. He's basically a third down guy right now. And until he develops into a better blocker, I don't think he'll go anywhere. Maybe late 3rd, 4th round, because he is an explosive offensive player, but he's not going to give you any help in the run game, except maybe being a decoy going into the flat for a run-pass option. So he's got some holes that definitely need improvement.
Yeah, he really hurt himself. This is not the year for him to be coming out because he does rise up. He meets the occasion in big games, but he also, he's admitted that he doesn't get worked up for just the average game or someone they should beat. And that's not what NFL coaches want to see. They don't want to have to tell this guy that you actually need to be playing all 16 games. It's not the great year for him. It's going to hurt his draft stock, obviously, but he's got the ability. He's got that potential. Like you said, once he improves his run blocking a little bit and can show that he's going to be invested in the whole game and not just, collecting a paycheck some weeks and then other weeks going out there because he's on Monday Night Football and trying to be a star. If he can clear those things up, he's got a chance to do something in this league.
Yeah, I agree. The key stat for him, if I'm looking at him as a GM, is for his career, he averaged 17.1 yards per catch. So he's down the field, he's beating safeties with his size, and he's making runs after the catch. So, I mean, he's going to get you chunk yardage, but if you can make him more consistent day to day, week to week, game to game, season to season, that's when he'll be either a good tight end in the league or kind of, flounder out after his rookie contract.
Yeah, I think a 4th round projection is pretty fair. I'm not very high on Leggett, to be completely honest. I think that he takes games off more often than not. He's shown up in huge situations where we needed him. And the biggest thing to describe him in my mind is inconsistent. I don't think he, like you said, he doesn't show up for the games where just because we should beat somebody, he thinks he doesn't need to come to play. Definitely not the case in the NFL. I think that he's going to struggle early on for sure in the NFL. I don't know. I don't want him on the Titans just because I've seen him play consistently or inconsistently in this case. But I've seen him week to week, and he's just, you don't know which Jordan Leggett you're getting. And in the NFL, you can't do that.
Background-wise, size-wise, athleticism-wise, though, he does remind me of Jimmy Graham coming out, where a lot of people didn't know about him because he's a former basketball player. He was recruited more for basketball than football. He didn't really have a position coming to Clemson. He kind of got moved around. You know, they tried him on defensive end and then, you know, settled in at tight end. So he's got all the raw tools. But, yeah, I agree. I think, I don't know, as selecting players, I love Leggett because of what he did for Clemson the last couple of years. He was a great player for Clemson when we needed him to be. But I wouldn't trust him being an integral part of a pro team.
Which is fair, definitely. I like him personally as a kid. You know, he's not a bad guy. It's just that I've seen so many times where we needed him and he just didn't show up. And for all the good he did, which, you know, he definitely made his mark at Clemson, personally would rather take a lot of other guys than him in the 4th round, personally.
Yeah, agreed.
But moving on, Wayne Gallman definitely had his share of high and lows at Clemson. With Wayne Gallman coming out in this class, I think maybe with his height being 6 foot, 215, he ran a 4.6, which isn't, you know, great for a running back, but not bad. I see him sort of as, you know, in that right around where Jordan Leggett would go, somewhere around the 3rd, maybe fourth round. What do you think about Wayne Gallman?
First of all, I think he should have gone back to school for his last year. He had 1 year of eligibility left. I think he would have been better off starting a graduate degree at Clemson and playing for another season to develop his his pass blocking and his footwork within the line of scrimmage and within the hole for his north-south running. That being said, he's the toughest runner in the country. You know, he's not the best runner. He's the toughest runner. He's the guy who he looks like he doesn't think he can physically be tackled. He runs with that kind of purpose. His only fumble in his 2.5 years as a starter was when he was literally knocked out against NC State, which again, should have been targeting. And he was literally knocked out and he dropped the ball. That's his only fumble in 2.5 years as a starter, outside of the messed up exchange between him and Watson against Alabama. So he's got good ball security. He's a physical runner. He needs better awareness. He doesn't have breakaway speed, but he's a very tough guy, and you can't teach that. So I do think he'd be deserving of that kind of 4th round area. But with how running backs kind of work in the draft, what I've seen the last couple of years is they take the top ones really high, and they take everybody else 6th and 7th round. So I do think he'll end up being in that 5th to 7th range. I think somebody's going to get a good locker room guy, a good practice guy, and maybe a guy that earns some carries by midseason when some health issues start coming around for the team.
Gallman is he's a bull in a china shop. He's a guy that just bursts through the offensive line, physical. He's a big guy, and he even runs bigger than he actually is when you watch him on tape. You know, you look at the guy and you're like, oh, man, that kid's 230 easily, and he's, more towards the 215 area. Big physical runner. The one big thing that I've noticed in watching tape on him is he sometimes gets impatient, doesn't wait for the block where he could have gotten more yards, just doesn't have great vision. Do you think that, how much does that, or we'll start with, do you agree with that assessment, and how much do you think that affects his ability to play at the next level?
I hate to agree with it, but I do. There were a lot of times where, the guard was pulling about to set a block, and Gallman was like, screw this, I'll take this defender on my own. And he gets tackled after a 3-yard gain compared to had he gotten the block, possibly could have gone the distance. I do think that's going to hurt him. I do think that is something a lot of other running backs in this draft class, again, a good running back draft class too, really underrated position in the draft nowadays, but a good draft class, with McCaffrey and Cook and Fournette and Pumphrey and all these guys. So again, he's going to move back due to the strength of the class. but he does need to be a little more patient. And then, honestly, on those 3rd and 1s and 4th and 1s, he gets overly patient. This is something I watched as a fan all year, where his sophomore season, he was like, you know what, screw it, I'm going to run straight up the middle. I'm going to tackle my own offensive lineman. I'm going to get that first down. Whereas this year, he almost looked like he was trying to prove he was patient on those short yardage. Instead of just picking up the first down and moving on to 1st and 10, he would kind of try to dance at the hole a little bit too long and get tackled for a loss. It was well chronicled, the struggles we had on 4th and 1. Again, it showed up in our loss to Pitt. We pitched to the outside, and he didn't follow his blocks, and he got tackled short. We ended up losing on the game-winning field goal by Pitt. So it is an issue, and it is going to hurt his draft stock, and it is going to be nitpicked by every team that interviews him, every team that works him out, and every team that watches his tape.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, you probably don't remember who I'm talking about, but his body type reminds me a lot of former Titan Chris Brown, just the way he runs, same running style. We were able to get a good year, maybe 2 years out of Chris Brown, but the way I saw it last year, he definitely declined in his production. Like you said, he hesitated a lot. We weren't able to get the 4th down and short yardage, but I mean, the year prior, we were talking about the Wayne train, and everybody was hyped up about him, and I definitely think he should have came back and played another year, but he chose to come out.
Yeah, he's one of those guys where you get enamored a lot of times with guys that are really quick, really nice feet, and they get to the NFL and they're not mentally there. And Gallman, at least, is going to be physical and just run hard for you every single day, and you can't teach that. So I do think that's a really big pro for him. And then also he had the issues this year. Clemson, I think, was 105th in the FBS, something around that range. It was really bad. It was in the bottom 25 in the FBS in yards before contact. So we did have a lot of offensive line issues, which is why Watson's throws per game was significantly higher than the year before, which also has to do with his interceptions because he threw so much more. But a lot of the struggles he had this year weren't necessarily his fault. They were no one blocked, We didn't have a good running game until we played Georgia Tech, and everyone saw how they ended their season. They weren't very good. It was mediocre at best, and our offensive line really didn't give him a lot of chances to show his running potential this year.
Moving on, though, another true junior that's going out early who I would have loved to see stay. Wide receiver Artavis Scott. Scott reminds me a lot of a guy that we just saw leave town in Kendall Wright. I think he's almost got the exact same size. He's 5'10", 193, ran a 4.6. He's a lot quicker than he is fast, and I think that shows up on his film. He's made a lot of screen plays for us. He's a real quick, shifty guy. I could see him going to a team somewhere like New England where he would have a lot of success, but you got to put him in the right system because, as we know personally with Kendall Wright, if you don't use him properly, it's not going to work out for him.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up New England for that because my pro comparison that I personally did for him was Julian Edelman, guy who's shiftier than he is fast. And this goes a lot in that mold, like you said, screens, but I'm even going to the jet sweeps. His freshman year, when Clemson was trying to end that 5-year losing streak to South Carolina, and he took those 2 jet sweeps, followed some blockers, made a couple moves in the hole, and took off down the sideline for touchdowns. And he's got that kind of shiftiness, that kind of I'm going to pick up 8 yards when I should get 3 type of footwork. And I think that's an important thing for him. I also agree he should come back for another year. Really worked on his precise route running, really worked on his ability to play against more physical corners because, like you said, he's small and undersized. So if people throw off his timing, he had issues. But at the end of the day, you do have to look at he's the all-time leading receptions leader at a school that has guys like Sammy Watkins, DeAndre Hopkins, Aaron Kelly, who a lot of people don't remember, and a lot of good receivers, especially recently, that have gone through that school. And he leads all of them in catches, and he's very sure-handed. And that's why I think he was trusted on a lot of third downs. He was trusted to make moves after the catch. And he even has a better jump ball than people give him credit for. Oklahoma last year, in the 15-16 season. He made a beautiful jump ball and a long third down to lead to our first touchdown in that game. So it's he is better than advertised. I don't think he should have left this year. I get that he'd already graduated. Also, he's a smart guy, graduated in 3 years. So good football IQ, I assume. But, again, could have benefited from coming back another year. Probably, again, that 4th, 5th round range.
Yeah, with his speed, he's a guy who definitely needs to put some more on tape first.
Yeah, for sure. He had a much better freshman, and then he had a really good sophomore year when Mike Williams was injured. But then he kind of showed he's not very good at being that kind of supporting role. And he's not a guy in the NFL that's going to be your go-to guy. So he really needed to show a little bit more in that regard, I think.
Well, being drafted as late as we expect him to be drafted, you need to make a big deal. You need to make plays on special teams. Do you think that is going to be something that Scott can do in order to guarantee his spot on the team for a couple of years while he develops?
He's the reason we won the national championship. I'm going to be very honest. We were not going to beat Louisville had Artavis Scott not taken that kickoff return almost to the house. He set us up, again, for some Jordan Leggett heroics. And he did that. He also played in some punt coverage sometimes. He played on some kickoff coverage, made some good tackles. So he's very willing. He's very able. He's a good punt returner. We benched Ray McLeod last year, who was flashier, for the more sure-handed Scott who got yards. And again, that goes back to, Wes Welker with the Patriots. Again, another small guy, sure-handed. Wasn't very fast, but they put him in on punt returns because he was very sure-handed, wasn't going to fumble, and can make a few moves. So I do think special teams is a place he can make a living while he develops, while he works with quarterbacks on rhythm, while he works on maybe even beefing up a little bit and works on his route running.
Safety, Jadar Johnson. One knock on him that most people will say is that he only has 1 year experience. He's also made some pretty big plays this past season, and he's played behind some pretty good safeties in T.J. Green and Jaron Kearse. Jadar's probably going to be a later round draft pick, maybe 6th or 7th. But what do you like about Jadar?
I like his ball production, his ability to go to the ball, make plays. He honestly reminds me of Malik Hooker, who's being discussed as a top 10 pick this year. Also, his commitment, I think, is a big deal. He's a very committed guy. He gave a speech at the national championship ceremony in Death Valley about how he wanted to, transfer to SC State, which was his hometown in Orangeburg. And then Dabo talked him into saying, you'll get your time, just keep putting in the work, you'll get your time. And I think that'd be an invaluable asset as a pro as well, to keep developing until he gets his time and keep getting better until he gets his time. He's relatively fast. He's got long arms. He's strong. He put up 19 reps on the bench despite only being about 210 pounds. He's very instinctful. He made some big plays, got a lot of swats. He's a very good safety near the line of scrimmage. So, again, I think another one of those undervalued guys where, again, 1 year of starting for a safety puts you in the 6th round, but 1 year starting as a quarterback makes you Mitch Trubisky being looked at as the 1st overall pick. So right. I don't really understand how people can nitpick his experience while they're saying Trubisky is a god who's, born from the Virgin Mary. So it's a little bit interesting, that dynamic, but I think he's a lot better than that one season. And a lot of that is, you mentioned Kearse and Green were great safeties at Clemson, and, he's behind them. So it was tough for him to get in there, but he made the most of this year and was very integral to their run.
Two things I wanted to bring up with him is another guy that has, some experience playing special teams that, is going to help him extend his career in the NFL, obviously. And another thing is this guy really blew me away in the Shrine game practices and leading up, and he played well in the game as well. A lot of scouts are taking that as one of the best positives for him, is in those practices he was stellar. He was helping other guys figure out coverages. He was helping other guys figure out the plays. He was where he needed to be every single time. in the right position at the right time. Really had some outstanding practices. How much do you think that's going to elevate him in this draft?
I think he has a good chance to, because again, that's against the top seniors available. That's that's a big deal. And then it's also with NFL coaches who get that close-up look. And I think those stellar practices will kind of get around and just show, he's a lot better than what we're giving him credit for. And I think it could really boost him up, maybe a full round or so. But again, he'll still go middle to end of draft. So it's another one of those guys where we may look back, if he develops the way that he should, to being a really good value pick.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Next up, man, I already know where you're going to go with this, but I'm just going to try to downplay him a little bit, because I understand what you're about to say, and I agree with you for the most part. But Ben Boulware, obviously the biggest thing with him is his heart, his leadership. He doesn't have the prototypical size, though. Do you think he's going to be able to overcome? And I don't want to say he's a 3-down guy. I do think he could have a long career in the league, but he's got a lot to overcome physically as far as the size goes. But, I mean, as well as I do, that guy is somebody you want on the field on your team. I mean, we all saw it.
Well, he was a little bit underlooked coming out of Anderson High School as well. He's from Anderson, South Carolina, right near Clemson. A little bit overlooked. He didn't start until his junior year. He played some in the rotation his sophomore year. So in 2 years as a starter and some playing time behind Stephon Anthony, again, first-round pick, another great player that he was behind, he had 325 tackles in 2 years as a starter, and then some playing time as a sophomore. 325. In that time, that's the most in the country. So his production's there. The tape is there. The instinct's incredible. There was twice in that Alabama game where you saw him pre-snap dissect the play and shift the defense, and he was in the backfield making the play, including what should have been the game-clinching drive until we let them get 15 yards on 3rd and 16. But he put them in that position by diagnosing that play, getting in the backfield, blowing it up. His instincts are incredible. His game experience is incredible. His intangibles, incredible. And this year, he had 5 double-digit tackle games, which was, I think, the 3rd most in the country, including 18 in the game against Louisville, which was, in my opinion, the most hyped game of the regular season in the ACC, because they just come off that big win off Florida State. And he showed up, and, he had 3 sacks on Lamar Jackson, who, people are claiming is incredible religious Cummings. And then he's also got better athleticism than I think people give credit for. Take that one-handed interception he had against Baker Mayfield in the playoffs 2 years ago. And I'd like to include that he did give Mayfield a concussion on the return of that interception, which I'm not going to say I was happy about it, but I'm not a big Baker Mayfield fan. So, he's a brute. He's awesome. He's the guy I want in my locker room, and he's the guy I'm going to take. He's probably, 3rd or 4th linebacker off the board, in my opinion, outside of the guys who are just flat out better than him, like Reuben Foster. Once you take those, obvious guys who are better than him, if there's any doubt, like if you're looking at Boulware and another guy, and you don't know Boulware's the guy, easily. So, and his production's there, and I think he can have that same production in the NFL. Not great in coverage sometimes, so I do think he's maybe a 1st, 2nd down guy, but maybe that develops.
The big thing that's going to be talked about is, size and quickness. Because obviously, like, everything that you can't measure, this guy obviously has. That normally ends up being the problem. It's like, oh, well, he's strong, he's fast, but is he a leader? Does he love the game? Those kind of stuff. Everybody knows that it's there with Ben Boulware. The problem is the stuff you can measure is not quite there. This puts the margin for error for him very, very, very small. That's my worry with him, is that size and quickness, might limit his ability to ever be a starter. Do you think he will be a starter in the NFL?
Yeah, by his 2nd year, I would think. And I do think a lot of that, what he doesn't have in the quickness, because obviously, you measure the shuttle drills and the cone drills and all that. And yeah, he's not as quick, but he's always in the right spot. And if you watch his tape, he's always at the ball. Like, if there's a pile, he's there. If there's a tackle, he's there. If someone's forcing a fumble, he's there. If, someone's tipping a pass, he's there. And his game IQ and his game recognition, I think, puts him in the right places probably 99% of the time to easily make up for his shortcomings. And he's a very aggressive guy, and he's a very aggressive linebacker, and that he's, in my opinion, probably the second best run-stopping linebacker in the draft behind Reuben Foster, who's a freak. So just his instincts and his game study, his tape study, and his ability to recognize plays, shift the defense, and he can kind of be that guy that, that defensive captain type role where you're marching around the positions, maybe by his fourth or fifth year, once he kind of earns his stripes a little bit. But he's an incredibly cerebral player, and you can tell that, again, just watch his game against Alabama where he's directing the defense before every play. While Steve Sarkisian's trying to outthink Venables, Boulware's outthinking both of them. So it's really neat to see his film study translate to him being always around the football, diagnosing plays.
Yeah, my question with him is going to be if he can actually crack a starting lineup on a permanent basis. I think he'll get some starts in there, but I think he's going to be more of a rotational linebacker. Somebody gets hurt, he'll get some time. But he's got all of the intangibles, the measurables are good. They're going to hurt him at the NFL level, where it's a game of milliseconds and inches. And if you're a millisecond too slow, that guy could be gone for big yards. And it's going to be a balancing act, putting him in the right system, someone getting the right fit, giving him a chance to succeed. Because I don't think there's much more he needs to learn about the game so much as he's just going to have to find what his skill set level is in the NFL and play around that.
Yep, I agree. I think his comparison, I think he's a better version of Manti Te'o, who's had some decent seasons with the Chargers, but another undersized guy who lacked the quickness. But I think he's a more instinctive, better Manti Te'o. So I do think he could hopefully prove that at the next level. But like you said, maybe if those shortcomings, those milliseconds and inches can be a big difference with some of the best athletes in the world. So that could hurt him.
And hopefully he doesn't have an internet girlfriend that's actually a dude.
That could help a little bit, But
yeah, listen, I love his heart. I love his intensity. Great leader, obviously, but the NFL game is another level, and I don't know that he has. Obviously, speed is his main crack on him, basically. But I honestly see him as a situational guy who can have a long, 8-year career not being a starting linebacker, but filling in where he's needed and being a situational guy where I think he can do very well. But I don't see him as a every down NFL linebacker.
I just know, and y'all, again, as Titans people will know this, I just know that Boulware was 5 for 5 on solo tackles on Derrick Henry in the national championship game 2 years back. So I know he can bang with the biggest people. Henry's bigger than most defensive linemen. So if Boulware can solo tackle that guy 5 out of 5 times without having to use the dreads to grab onto, I think he's a good enough tackler at least to be in the league. And then, hopefully that athleticism can not let him down.
Interesting stat there. Good pull. I did not know that. A guy that's really easy to like. And we all hope the best for him, obviously. That's about all we have, though. Thanks a lot for coming on, Alex. You provided a lot of insight, a lot of really good stuff there. So big thank you for coming on to the show.
Yeah, I very much appreciate y'all having me. I enjoyed it.
That was Alex Poda giving us great insight to this Clemson draft class. As we said, very good. One of the best draft classes coming out. So a lot to look for. A lot of potential Titans on this list, guys. A lot of guys that we could end up seeing in two-tone blue. And we'll see how all that pans out on April 27th. Thanks, everybody, for listening to the show. Thanks to my great co-hosts, as always. As always, remember to check out hang10.com. That's HANGTN.com for the best and most unique Titans apparel. You can only find their stuff there. You can't find it anywhere else. So if you're looking for some different stuff, definitely check them out. They have some really great stuff. that's all we have for this week. Be sure to check us out next week. We're going to be doing our draft preview. That's the last show before the NFL draft. So be sure to check it out. We're going to have mock drafts, a lot of stuff to look forward to next week. So definitely check it out. And that's it. Tighten up.
Yeah, fucking fucks.
I'm ready to watch Matt lay some wood, I guess. Or watch Matt watch.
I just said I'm not laying the wood, Glenn. I'm going to let him lay the wood.
He said he was going to lay back and take the wood.
I never said anything. You keep your fantasies to yourself.
Whatever Matt does when he watches other guys lay wood is up to Matt, you know?
Yeah.
Listen.
Teach their own, I guess.
Thanks for listening to the Two-Tone Uncensored podcast. You can listen to the show at twotoneuncensored.podbean.com or by downloading the Podbean app on your mobile device. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter at Two-Tone Uncensored and like us on Facebook.